Hello there. This is Jeff Erdman with E.D.S. Inc. Shandon, and we've got another little video for you tonight. What we're doing is we have to make an extension to an arbor. I've got an arbor that has a .3143 hole in it. This is 1 inch. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an arbor so that this will fit onto it, and then it'll slide on over the .13143 arbor that I have. And we're going to be using this with a router. It's not for metal, it's for wood, but there's some milling to make this little part up. So I'll show you what this is. I've got it kind of laid out here. I don't know if you can see that. Let's see if we can get that. There we go. Okay, so let's see, get it the right direction. There you go. Now you can see the layout of that tool. The part, let me grab something to point with. Okay, boy, it's hard to work with the camera this way. This part here will go up against the current arbor back plate, and this part will be about 1/4 inch thick this way, and it'll be an inch this way. This shaft here, this part of the shaft, will be 1 inch, and this part, oh boy, I'm having a hard time keeping this straight looking in the camera, and this part here will be about 2 5/8, and there'll be the hole that runs through the center of both these. Now what will happen is we'll put that blade in between these two pieces here, and there's a hole through this piece as well, and then there's a nut that tightens this to that piece. So this piece will be kind of have a sleeve that'll fasten over this part here and clamp that blade in between here. Now I'm making it as wide as it is because I want a specific depth of cut when I use this. So this will be kind of like a bearing that'll ride on the wood as the router turns, and that'll prevent the blade from cutting any deeper than what I want. And so that'll leave basically about 1/4 inch depth cut, just slightly over that. And that's exactly what I need. So anyway, so what we're going to do is we've got a piece of brass in the lathe right now, and we're going to go ahead and face that off and start making this part. Okay, so I've got my piece of brass in the lathe already. We've already indexed it in, and indicated it in rather, and it's been faced off once, but I'm gonna now that I've got it all set in the jaws, I'm gonna go ahead and face it again. Now as I turn this, all the dimensions were on 0 except for one side, and I can't remember which side it was. It was 0.02 off. The other 3 sides were dead on 0. So I'm not sure, but this is probably not a perfectly round piece. And I know I used this once before on the bushing that I made for the forklift, and I had the same problem trying to get this indicated into the lathe because it seemed to be slightly off. So I think this is a non-round part, so we'll be taking it down slightly in its width and making this work for us. So we'll go ahead and let me get my lathe set up, and we'll start facing this off and drilling it and doing whatever else we need to do. Okay, there's a hole already in here, and the hole is about 1 7/16, and so that's not 1 7/16. It's 1 and 174. I've measured that using my Starrett, and I just went ahead and my digital caliper used that. This digital caliper isn't the best quality, but it's relatively accurate. It's within a thousandth. So it's 1.178 is what that hole in here is. So that's a little bit too big for my purpose on either side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to I think I'm going to go ahead and cut this off. So I'll probably part the depth of this off, and then we'll face off the part and then go from there. Okay, so what I've done is I've measured the depth of this hole, and then I've just come up here and I've outlined where the inside of my cutting tool should be. So I'm just going to take this in and we'll start cutting this piece off. Well, it doesn't look round at all. Let me double check this with my indicator. It really doesn't look round. Of course, that might just be the fact that it's it isn't round. I just want to make sure I've got this dialed in right. Well, I guess we've gotten some movement because this certainly is not round or set right. So we'll go ahead and we'll readjust this again, and I'll get back to you as soon as I get it all adjusted in. Okay, we'll try it again. There's some flex in this head because as I was adjusting it down, I got it within 2/1000ths, and I could change by 1/1000ths to 2/1000ths by just applying pressure to one side of the head or the other on the sides. So bearings are probably shot in this 100-year-old machine. So I'll probably have to fix that, but that shouldn't stop us from what we're doing here. So we're going to go ahead and cut this out. Washer someday. Okay, I'm going to have to reset this in the vice jaws, unfortunately, so I can get more material out of it. Yeah. so I'm going to be cutting right up to the jaws. So I'm going to use this cutter here. So the rake is a little bit to the, on this is just about right for cutting right up to that jaw without actually hitting it. So we're going to go ahead and install this particular cutter in our holder, and then we'll go ahead and start taking this down to the right size. Part in there to make this work. It looks that way, barely. Barely. Now once I get this all cut down to what I need, I'll have to probably take it out of the chuck, flip it, and trim off the other side. Call it there. Unfortunately, I didn't have the camera on, but I've got this set exactly, cut exactly to where I want it. We've got it at 2.625 across. Exactly, we're within a tenth or so. So as far as I'm concerned, that is super good. So the next thing what we'll do is we'll countersink this and we'll bore it for our diameter, inside diameter. And then we'll, on this one here, we're going to hollow it out to about a little bit over an inch. So it mounts over the arbor of the other sleeve. And then we'll part that piece off, and then we'll create our next piece. Okay, we've set up the center drill in our tailstock, and so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to center drill this. Right at a quarter. And that's where we want it to be. So now we can part this piece off. So what we have is just slightly over an inch. It's maybe a couple thousandths over an inch. I'm going to go ahead and chamfer these edges. And then we'll go ahead and we'll part this part of the flange off. Get our part tool in here. Hopefully this will cut deep enough to, I may have to try to move this out a little bit. Let me adjust my cut-off tool because I think we're going to have to move this out a little bit further. Okay, I've glued my part. I'm now going to scribe it so I can have a mark to cut to it. And of course it's on the back side of gluing. So I didn't do enough gluing, but I can see where my mark is, so we're going to go ahead and cut to it. Okay, we're ready to start. have our part made. So this is the shaft that has to go on, and I'll show you how we're going to work that up. Let me pull this out of the vise. What did I do with my key? It's helpful if I always put it back in the same spot, but I don't. Okay, so what we have here, you can see that that's pretty much like my drawing. I have a little end out on here that's a little bit wider. I've got a little bit end in here that's a little bit narrower. This is the arbor that the blade is going to sit on. So the blade will, let me grab all the parts. I haven't finished this part, I still haven't deburred that, but we'll get to that. This will kind of show you what I'm up to here. So this will slide on here like so. This will slide over that, like so, clamping that blade with just the right amount of cut that we need from our material. And this, boy, that barely is going to fit there. I may have to re-drill all this because, oh, I see, it's binging up against the burr. So we'll, otherwise it would slip on through, but it's banging up against that little burr. So I will have to get rid of that. But basically, that's what we have. We have this running all the way through. There'll be a nut on this side that'll fasten it on. That'll hold this, the blade within on the shaft. And so as this is spinning, it'll just cut the depth that we want. The bearings, the brass will serve as a bearing surface, and that should do it for us. This is the cutter in the router, and we'll show you what it did here on the material that we're cutting. Oops, nope, it's down this way. So basically cut that little slot into, I don't even know if you can see it, a little slot here in the frame. Well, thanks for watching E.D.S. Inc. Shandon. We really appreciate your viewership and any comments that you might have. Today we've, for the first time in several weeks, did some taping, and we're able to use the old Hindi lathe to make up some an item that we needed to solve a problem for today's workload. We had to do some kerfing on some jams with a router, and although we could have bought a kerfing tip for the router, unfortunately nobody locally had one, and we have a job that had to go out in the morning, and so that needed to be kerfed, and so I thought, well, I'll just get this. I knew that I had some slitting blades for metal, so I went over there and looked through them, found a blade that I thought would work, and then we built an arbor for it. So that's what you got to see me do here. The arbor actually was an arbor that was already made up. It was for putting different router bits on or cutters onto the router, and so I used this shaft. I had kerfing bits already that I could cut from a 1/2 inch kerf down to 1/8 of an inch, but the user said that this kerf had to be exactly 1/16 inch, and that it had to be 1/4 inch deep, and he wouldn't buy an 1/8 inch kerf, so we had to get it at 1/16. So since we didn't have it in the shop, I took the shaft that I would normally put my router bit cutters on there, and I grabbed one of my slitting cutters from my stock of metalworking stuff, and we made it work on the router shaft. So what we did is we made two components. There was an inside component and an outside component, this one here. I'm going to hold this up so you can see a little bit better. So there's an inside component, this one here, and the outside component here. And they're screwed to the arbor with a nut on the top. There's some brass washers there that are underneath the nut. Basically, you saw what I did. This first component had an arbor on it that the saw blade mounted to. It was a 1-inch arbor, and it extended about 3/16 of an inch past this dimension on the back of the blade, this direction. And then we made, the first part that we made, and you saw me make that, was this outside portion. You saw me bore a 1-inch hole into it, and then I took my boring bar and cleaned that out to a depth of about 3/16, 1/4 of an inch. And so that fit right over this arbor, sandwiching this blade in between, and accomplishing what we needed to do. Now, why did I have this step down here? Well, I had to get right up to the base plate of the router with this part here. So I had to take this and clean this up some, make it so that it'll fit into the hole of the base plate on that router. Now you can notice that we had this in the router and the collet on the router all the way to this black shank right here. So it was pretty steady, and the balance of this was all my part that we made. And we put it in the router. It was turning probably about 15,000 RPM, and that could be pretty scary for a big old thing like that. But it ran just as smooth as silk, produced the project that the product that we wanted to get done. And the brass part here, these thicker brass parts, the reason that I made those this way is I needed a bearing surface against the wood so that the wood it wouldn't eat into the wood as it spun. And so this big wide bearing surface proved to be efficient in that manner. So it accomplished what we intended it to do. It was a lot of fun for me to make. I haven't been able to get out here and work on my lathe in several weeks, so that was really fun. The old 100-year-old Hindi, it's not a precision machine by any means, but it got the job done, and with a somewhat amateur fella doing it. So at any rate, I had fun doing it. I hope you enjoyed watching it, and we hope to have more content here. My nephew's coming out from the Dakotas as soon as the blizzards stop out there, and right now they've got some 60- degree weather out there with the wind chill. And I told him, don't bother coming yet. Wait until the storm gets past you and then come on down when things are a little bit better. The last thing I wanted him to do is get stuck in a blizzard up in the Dakotas and be sitting there, endangering his life basically in that sort of weather. So he decided he'll be leaving this Friday. And then we've got a lot of exciting things that will be going on that we'll try to tape and so that you can enjoy them too. In the shop here, we're going to be putting a loft up. I have to make the trusses for that, so we're going to make those out of that steel I got last year, and because we're going to put all our grinders up on that loft. So I'll have a loft above for my grinding machines, and down below will be all my milling machines, lathes and that sort of thing. I don't have a whole lot of room here for a machine shop. I have to make sure that the majority of the shop is open for production, because that's how I make a living. So, and machining is not the way I make my living. This is how I repair the tools I have. This is how I do various little projects that I enjoy doing, and so that's the purpose of my little shop here. And fortunately, I've been able to build up an inventory of tools and that sort of thing in a relatively short period of time via auctions. So I really watched the auctions, and I made some good deals, bought some bargain equipment that's being used in our production in the shop quite often. We have an old Yates American bandsaw, 36-inch throat. We've got a big old blade on that. It's about a 1 1/4 blade, I think, and might be 1 1/2. I can't remember. And we resaw all our veneer stock on that saw, so that we can say a door needed to be walnut, or it needed to be beech or ash or whatever it was. We could buy our stock and then mill it to the thickness we want and apply it to the stiles and rails of the door to build that door sufficiently for what the purpose would be. So that's come in handy. We got the big old dual bandsaw in the back. We've got an old Oliver lathe that you saw me using for metalworking before I got the Hindi here, and it'll still be used. I've got to still make those stops for the prison that I've been procrastinating on for nearly a year. So that has to get done, and I just have to finish a couple of plates to mount routers to them, and then we'll show you how we're going to use that to mill those stops. It's kind of a unique idea I had to put routers on a wood lathe and use it to do the cutting instead of using hand tools. And so what the plates will do will enable me to switch out routers and bits. So it'll be like a quick tool change. So I'll slide one router in, slide it out. When I'm done with that process, slide another router in. It'll already have the bit, it'll already be set up to the right length, and we'll move it to the next component, pull that one out, put the next one in. It's going to take about 3 or 4 different setups, and so I want to make sure that I have all those setups in line so we can get it done relatively quickly. And I think that might be a fun project to watch. So that's still coming up. We've got the hinge for the Acme, or the Ajax. I keep calling it Acme, I don't know why, but the Ajax mill. We've got that hinge project that we're still doing. We still have to finish the clamps for the faceplate for that Hindi, or for the hinge that I'm making for the Ajax mill. And I actually could probably use the Hindi lathe to do that because I figured a way to mount a 4-jaw on there. But I started with this faceplate idea, and I'm going to finish it out. We're going to put clamps on it. We're going to make it the way that I originally intended, and doing that just for the fun of it, really. That's it, just to see if I can do it and make it. So I've got I went and I got some, there's a problem with getting old. You can't remember nothing. Anyway, it's like a Delron material that I've purchased for those clamps, because aluminum riding against aluminum, sometimes it starts to ball up and it gets inefficient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to epoxy this Delron type of material down into the base of that, and the aluminum will slide along that. It's really slick material. And then on the dovetails, I'm going to put some of that on that too. So there won't be any aluminum to aluminum. It'll be Delron to aluminum. And so that'll make a little bit smoother movement. And so anyway, I have to finish that up and all those components too. So there's a little bit that we have yet to do. I ask that you tune in again. And if you enjoy E.D.S. Inc. Shandon, then give us a thumbs up, maybe subscribe to us, and we'll try to keep on bringing you this content. Thank you much. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later.